Chief Raymond Doyle was celebrated as the man who made Capital City safer than ever until a whistleblower's secret files revealed he may have engineered one of the biggest policing scandals in American history. In Capital City, the story began with an illusion. On paper, the city appeared to be thriving, transforming itself from a crime-ridden capital into a model of safety. Official statistics painted a picture that citizens wanted to believe. Violent crimes were down, burglaries were almost non-existent, and neighborhoods once considered dangerous were now supposedly calm and orderly. Local leaders praised the police department, calling it one of the most effective forces in the country. Newspapers printed glowing reports of progress, and television broadcasts showed smiling families enjoying streets that, according to official accounts, had never been safer. Yet, beneath this celebrated narrative, small cracks were beginning to show, cracks that would soon split into something far darker than anyone expected. The first signs came from places that did not rely on police statistics. Emergency rooms in the city's largest hospitals were seeing more patients with stab wounds, gunshot injuries, and violent assault traumas. Social workers reported that families were moving out of neighborhoods supposedly listed as low-crime zones, describing daily struggles with gang activity and drug-related violence. Ordinary citizens who once filed police reports began to whisper that their complaints were either ignored or mysteriously downgraded to lesser offenses. A break-in could be called lost property, a street fight labeled a verbal dispute. These changes seemed small on the surface but added up to a disturbing pattern. Journalists, trained to look beyond headlines, noticed the growing contradictions. Crime was supposedly dropping at historic rates, yet funeral homes were handling more young victims of violence than ever before. Reporters started comparing official police reports with hospital records, community accounts, and insurance claims. The differences were staggering. According to the department's data, burglaries had nearly vanished, but insurance companies were processing dozens of claims each week for stolen property. Assaults were said to be down by nearly 30%, but doctors and trauma units told a very different story. What made the situation even more unsettling was the silence of authority figures. City officials continued to praise the police department's results without question. Awards were handed out, and funding increased, as though the numbers were beyond scrutiny. Yet in the neighborhoods, people lived with a completely different reality, one where fear never disappeared, and crimes seemed to multiply even as official reports claimed the opposite. Behind the glowing image of progress, a shadow was spreading. Few knew it then, but the foundation of trust that held Capital City together was already beginning to crumble, setting the stage for one of the most shocking scandals the city would ever face. The unraveling of Capital City's polished image began with a single package that arrived at a small, independent newsroom. Inside the plain envelope was a stack of photocopied documents, each stamped internal use only. The files listed dozens of cases that had been reported by citizens but mysteriously reclassified into categories that bore little resemblance to the truth. A violent home invasion had been logged as trespassing. A stabbing in a downtown alley was marked as public disturbance. Even cases of armed robbery were listed as lost property or civil dispute. Alongside the files was a short, typed message from an unknown source claiming the police leadership had created an organized system to alter reports in order to show falling crime rates. The package didn't include a name, only a warning that those who questioned the system faced retaliation. For the journalists who opened the envelope, the material felt like a dangerous secret no one was supposed to see. They knew the risk of publishing without solid evidence, but they also realized this could explain the discrepancies they had been tracking for months. Quietly, they began to cross-check the leaked documents with publicly available police records. The differences were undeniable. Cases that should have been classified as serious crimes had been watered down into harmless categories. Entire incidents reported by victims appeared to have vanished from the database altogether, as if they had never happened. The mystery of the whistleblower deepened as more documents arrived in the following weeks. Each package revealed patterns that stretched back years, suggesting this was not a mistake or a few isolated cases, but a systematic effort. Notes scribbled in the margins of some files hinted that officers had been instructed by superiors to make the city look safer than it really was. The evidence was piling up, and so was the danger. The newsroom received anonymous phone calls warning them to drop the story. Editors noticed cars parked outside the office late at night. Yet the leaks continued, as if the source was determined to make the truth impossible to ignore. The documents also pointed to a motive. Around the same time the data manipulation began, the department had applied for multiple federal grants tied to crime reduction. Millions of dollars were awarded to the city, with the police chief praised for his leadership. Suddenly, the whistleblower's warning carried new weight. This was not only about image but about money and power. What started as a suspicion was quickly becoming the outline of a scandal that would reach far beyond the newsroom, drawing the attention of those with the authority to expose corruption on the highest level. The arrival of federal investigators in Capital City was quiet at first, almost invisible to the public. There were no flashing lights or bold announcements, only a handful of agents blending into the city, meeting with doctors, social workers, and community leaders. Their task was to determine whether the police department's celebrated drop in crime was genuine or carefully staged. The first step was to compare official data with records that could not be so easily manipulated. Hospitals opened their books, revealing rising numbers of patients admitted for gunshot wounds, stabbings, and assaults. Insurance companies confirmed a surge in claims for stolen property, even as burglary reports supposedly declined. Community groups shared logs of incidents they had documented when residents complained that police never filed their reports. Each piece of information painted the same picture. The official crime numbers did not reflect reality. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered the manipulation was not random, but followed a consistent pattern. Crimes began to vanish from records shortly after the police chief made a highly public promise to reduce crime by 20% within 2 years. At first, the reductions were small enough to avoid suspicion, but over time the changes grew bolder, turning violent offenses into minor infractions or erasing them entirely. When federal agents cross-referenced time-stamped hospital records with police logs, they found cases where stabbing victims were admitted on the same night. The department reported no violent incidents. The manipulation was blatant and systematic. Inside the police department, nervousness spread. Officers noticed unfamiliar faces asking questions, and whispers about an investigation circulated through the halls. Some supervisors warned their teams to stay quiet and avoid talking to outsiders. Computers were suddenly wiped, paper files went missing, and reports were reclassified overnight in a desperate attempt to hide the truth. Yet the very act of scrambling left its own trail, one that the investigators quickly picked up. Deleted files were recoverable, and missing reports raised more suspicion than they erased. By the third month of the probe, the investigators had enough to confirm that the city's crime miracle was a fabrication. The only question left was how high up the chain of command the deception went. Every piece of evidence seemed to point to the top, but proving it would require someone from inside the department to step forward. The stage was set for the wall of silence surrounding the police to finally begin cracking, and the agents knew it was only a matter of time before fear or conscience forced the truth into the open. The silence that had protected the department for so long began to weaken under the weight of the investigation. Federal agents returned again and again, armed with data that contradicted police records, and each visit pushed the pressure higher. Lower-ranking officers who had long carried the burden of following questionable orders started to waver. Some felt trapped, knowing that if they spoke out they might lose their careers, but if they stayed quiet, they risked being caught in a scandal that could ruin them anyway. The first cracks appeared when a patrol officer admitted privately that he had been ordered to downgrade a violent robbery into a simple theft. Once that testimony was recorded, more officers followed, each confirming the same pattern. They had been told that the image of a safe city mattered more than the truth. Supervisors had developed a disturbing routine. At the end of each shift, they reviewed crime reports, crossing out serious charges and changing them into minor ones. Officers were warned not to resist or question the orders. Some admitted they had destroyed evidence or altered witness statements to make crimes look less severe. The deeper the federal investigators dug, the clearer it became that this wasn't the work of a few bad officers. It was a planned system that involved many layers of leadership. What began as simple number manipulation had turned into a regular practice inside the department, treated as normal. The real turning point came when financial audits revealed the connection between fake reports and federal funding. The department had received millions of dollars in grants, money awarded only because the statistics showed major drops in crime. By lying, the police not only improved their reputation, but also filled their budgets with extra cash. For investigators, this meant the case wasn't just about misconduct anymore, it was outright fraud. The department had tricked not only its citizens but also the federal government. As pressure increased, loyalty inside the department began to fall apart. Some officers started cooperating, hoping for lighter punishment, while others stayed silent, terrified of being caught. But the image of unity was broken. Testimonies, documents, and financial records all pointed to the same conclusion: the top leadership had built its success on lies. What once was just rumor had now become undeniable truth. The scandal was about to explode. The end came quickly. At dawn, federal agents moved in. They raided police headquarters before most employees arrived, and senior officers were arrested in handcuffs. At the chief's home, agents found financial records, phones, and personal notes proving just how carefully the fraud had been planned. Within hours, the chief's arrest was headline news, and the photo of him being led away became a shocking symbol of betrayal for the whole city. The public's reaction was fierce. People realized they had been living under an illusion of safety. Parents were outraged to know their children had grown up in unsafe neighborhoods that were reported as crime-free. Families who had lost loved ones now faced the pain of seeing those deaths erased from official numbers. Trust between the community and the police was shattered. Politicians rushed to distance themselves. Many who once praised the department now condemned it, though they had benefited from its supposed success. Community leaders demanded accountability for not just the police but also for government officials who had supported the false image. The scandal had grown far beyond the police; it had become a political crisis. In the weeks that followed, federal oversight took control of the department. Dozens of officers were suspended, some charged, and others quietly resigned. The once proud police force was left broken, its reputation destroyed. For the public, the truth was devastating. The numbers they had trusted were lies, and the real scale of crime was much worse than they ever knew. Justice had come, but the scars of betrayal remained, a permanent reminder of how greed and ambition had silenced the truth.